All right, let's dive right in. We're about to unpack a story that, believe me, goes to some pretty wild places. It starts with a secret Pentagon program with UFOs, but it ends with a question about the very nature of reality itself. It's a journey from government secrets all the way to the fabric of consciousness. And we're going to start with this bombshell. Now, this isn't just some random guy. This is Robert Bigelow. He's an aerospace billionaire whose company was hired by the Pentagon with millions of your tax dollars to officially investigate UFOs. And in 2017, he goes on national television and says, point blank, not only are they real, they're here.
Now, that stunning admission didn't just happen out of the blue. It was actually the final act of a decade of secret work. You gotta go back to 2007, when the Defense Intelligence Agency quietly put out a request to study advanced aerospace threats. Bigelow's company gets the $22 million contract, and the program, which was eventually given the cover name ATEEP, runs completely in the shadows until the New York Times just blows the lid off the whole thing in 2017.
And with that story came these. You've seen them, the famous Tic Tac, Go Fast, and Gimbal videos. For the very first time, the Department of Defense went on the record and confirmed, yep, these are our videos. They're real objects, tracked by our best pilots in our most advanced jets, and we have no idea what they are. So that begs the question, right? How does a secret that's been kept for a decade suddenly just spill out into the open, complete with official, government-stamped videos? Was this just some clumsy leak? Or was it something way more calculated? Well, the evidence really points to a calculated campaign. It was orchestrated by a small, very well-placed group of insiders who basically decided, okay, it's time for the world to know. And the team they put together, I mean, you couldn't make this up. First, you've got Tom DeLonge, the rock star from Blink-182, who uses his fame to get in the room with some very serious people. Then you have Robert Bigelow, our aerospace tycoon, who's funding the private research. And then, the key, is Luis Elizondo, the career intelligence officer who actually ran ATIP from inside the Pentagon. And together, they formed this group called To the Stars Academy. And get this wasn't some last-minute decision. This quote comes from a source connected to DeLonge back in 2016, a whole year before the New York Times story dropped. They were already saying it, we're going to force the government's hand. This was a plan. So while this whole modern disclosure effort is absolutely fascinating, the truth is the highest levels of the U.S. government have been wrestling with this mystery and the secrecy for a very, very long time. Let's just wind the clock back a little bit. A perfect example? President Jimmy Carter. He famously saw a UFO himself before he was president, and he promised everyone that if elected, he would release every single government file on the topic. But as he quickly found out, it really wasn't that simple. This story is just incredible. When Carter asks for the files, he gets stonewalled by his own intelligence agencies. So a legal consultant named Daniel Sheehan is eventually granted access to this secure vault. And what he says he saw inside is mind-blowing. Official project books from Project Blue Book, the Air Force's old UFO study, and they were filled with pictures of a crashed saucer in the snow, and you could see Air Force personnel in parkas measuring the craft. The story shows that even the President of the United States was being kept out of the loop. So let's just pause for a second. We have decades of confirmed sightings, decades of high-level interest, and decades of deep, deep secrecy. But what if the question isn't just, are they real, or is the government hiding it? What if the real question is something completely different? What if the phenomenon itself isn't what we think it is at all? And this brings us to this radical idea called the theory of wow. It basically proposes that the entire UFO phenomenon, all of it, is a kind of performance. It's not about aliens coming here to study us or invade us. No, it's a deliberately bizarre reality-bending spectacle that's designed to do just one thing, make us go wow. And in that moment of pure astonishment, it forces us to question everything we think we know about the world. So let's just compare these two views, right? On one hand, you have the traditional idea, aliens in nuts and bolts spaceships. But the wow view, it's much stranger. It suggests this thing is more like a catalyst, driven by consciousness, that uses absurdity and wonder as a tool to just shake us awake. And when you look at it this way, a lot of the weirdest stuff starts to make a strange kind of sense. Think about it. The props change over time, right? The UFOs people saw in the 1890s looked like big, clunky airships, not sleek saucers. The special effects are designed for maximum strangeness. I mean, things like surgically precise cattle mutilations or weird angel hair falling from the sky. And the actors, the objects themselves, seem to be putting on a show, just like that Tic Tac did for those Navy pilots, showing off its impossible moves for no other reason than to be seen. But the theory doesn't stop there. It takes an even bigger leap, suggesting that UFOs are maybe just one act in a much, much larger play. A play where the central theme, the one thing that connects it all, is consciousness itself. This is where things get really interesting. The theory starts connecting these seemingly unrelated paranormal events. You have a UFO abductee who reports having an out-of-body experience. You have a person in a near-death experience who meets a being of light. You have a psychic remote viewer who can access information miles away. The source material argues that they all share one common thread. They are all expressions of consciousness working outside the brain beyond our normal rules of space and time. And look, this isn't just some fringe idea. This is a quote from Jim Summervon. This guy is a decorated 25-year veteran of the CIA's clandestine service and a core member of that To the Stars disclosure team. And after all his time in the government, his conclusion was, hey, this isn't a simple hardware problem, this is a consciousness problem. So the ultimate theory that we're unpacking here is this. This whole thing isn't really about little green men in spaceships. It's about what the insiders call the big game. And in that game, UFOs, ghosts, psychic abilities, NDEs, they're all just different plays being run by the same team, and they all point to one unifying principle: consciousness. I love this metaphor from a channeled source known as Seth that puts it another way. The idea is that reality isn't this fixed, objective thing that we just exist inside of. It's more like a canvas that we are actively co-creating with our own consciousness. We're not just characters in the story. In some fundamental way, we're the ones holding the brush. And so that leaves us with a final, really profound question. If any of this theory holds water, if our collective and individual consciousness is truly the brush that paints reality, then it forces us to look in the mirror and ask a pretty serious question. What kind of world are we choosing to paint? What reality are we choosing to create right now?